Yo.
Yo, Forrest, what's up?
Hey, renowned YouTuber maybe Dennis. What are you up to?
Just finished playing another Trails game. How about you?
Oh, I'm just doing the dishes. I might actually go for a run later, though, since it's not too hot today.
So, when are you gonna make your Deltarune theory video?
What do you mean? I posted my Destiny theory video last year. You know, the day before chapters 3 and 4 came out.
What about Chapter 5?
What about Chapter 5?
Didn't you watch a Nintendo Direct? Chapter 5 comes out tomorrow.
What's up, fellow cat petters, and happy Deltarune tomorrow to those who celebrate. Last year, I posted my Destiny theory a day before the release of chapters 3 and 4, and with the lore we got in those chapters, Destiny has even more evidence to back it up. Though we don't actually know for certain. The knight could be Carol, it could be Rudy, or even Papyrus, but if I were a betting man, I'd put my hard-earned chromer on Des. Since the community is pretty aligned to Des being the most likely knight candidate for now, today's theory is going in a different direction. I'd like to talk about the new lore that we got about the prophecy, and more specifically, if Susie is the referenced monster in Ralsei's retelling, or the girl from the original script. Near the beginning of Chapter 1, Ralsei retells the prophecy to the Fun Gang. In it, he states, 3 heroes appear at World's Edge, a human, a monster, and a prince from the dark. While we get some more info about the prophecy regarding the Roaring near the end of Cyberworld, we don't get any more information about the so-called Delta Warriors for the rest of the first 2 chapters. What Ralsei doesn't tell us is that what he described as the prophecy was an abridged version, and it isn't until halfway through Chapter 4 when we hear the original version. In the unabridged prophecy, the Delta Warriors are instead described as the 3rd hero, the prince, alone in the deepest dark. The 1st hero, the cage, with human soul and parts. And last was the girl. At last was the girl. The 2nd hero, the girl with hope crossed on her heart. Love finds its way to the girl. This unaltered prophecy gives us a lot more insight into who these heroes are. While it doesn't directly spell out that the 3 heroes are Chris, Susie, and Ralsei, it does make it pretty clear. The prince, alone in the deepest dark, is Ralsei, the dark prince who had no subjects or friends for the majority of his life. The cage with human soul and parts is Chris, the human who cages a human soul that the player exerts control over. And finally, the girl with hope crossed on her heart is Susie, who starts off antagonistic to Chris and Ralsei, but near the end of Card Castle becomes an optimist who encourages the rest of the Fun Gang, even when Ralsei is feeling down. But what if that last part wasn't true? Susie could match the description of the 2nd hero, but there's somebody else that we know who fits the bill much more closely. Chris's childhood friend and fellow Dark World explorer, Noelle Holiday. In contrast to Susie's introduction, where she throws Chris into a locker, Noelle offers to help Chris out by making a group of 3 for their class project. Even after Susie's character arc in Chapter 1, she isn't as consistently nice or hopeful as Noelle is throughout all 4 chapters. When Chris and Noelle are paired up in Cyber City during Chapter 2, she does nothing but try and fit in and be friendly with them. Noelle simply being nicer than Susie on average is shaky evidence. We learn a little bit more about the 2nd hero from Ralsei in Chapter 4. After Susie tells Ralsei that he doesn't have to keep everything to himself, he tells her that the prophecy says she's supposed to be able to equip ribbons. Susie doesn't let Chris equip ribbon items on her, or swords for that matter, though there is a female character who can in fact equip ribbons. And that character is, well, you know, Elle. In the image of the 2nd hero, we see her holding a sword, though Susie can only equip axes, at least in the first 4 chapters. While you may think that Noelle can only equip rings as her weapon, if you hack the Jingle Blade from Chapter 4 into Chapter 2, Noelle can actually equip it. This might just be a reference to the fact that it's a Dark World version of one of Noelle's candy cane pencils. It does give her another point towards being the 2nd hero. The only other thing we know about the 2nd hero is what we learn directly after she's introduced in the unabridged prophecy. That love finds its way to the girl. This, again, works for both Susie and Noelle, since we learn in Chapter 1 that Noelle has a crush on Susie, and in Chapter 2 that Susie might share those feelings. They also go on a couple almost dates, one on the Ferris wheel in Queen's Castle, and the other when Chris de-souls himself at the Holiday House in Chapter 4. There's also the fact that after the Gerson fight in Chapter 4, Susie asks which character from Dragon Blazers she would be, and Gerson tells her she would be the dragon. Although Dragon Blazers isn't the prophecy, it is based on Gerson's book series, Lord of the Hammer, which is based itself on the prophecy. At least the version of the prophecy that's around in the light world. I wouldn't put this as a true point against Susie being the second hero, though, just due to the degrees of separation. We can also pretty easily give a point to both Susie and Noelle for fulfilling the girl part of the prophecy, since they both identify as female and are in high school. And, while it may be a bit of a stretch, we often see female party members in older JRPGs as the healer classes. Using that as soft directional evidence, Susie and Noelle also both share an affinity for healing. Again, Noelle is able to use moderate healing magic as soon as she becomes a party member in Chapter 2, while Susie only learns very weak healing magic about 2/3 through the chapter. So that's 5-3 in Noelle's favor for being the second hero from the prophecy. Awesome, so Noelle is the true second hero and Susie's the imposter. So, you know what they say, that's, just a theory. A game. Well, I don't actually think this gives us the full picture. Susie matching up to aspects of the second hero isn't a red herring. I think that the girl from the prophecy could be either Noelle or Susie, depending on the player's choices. With the exception of being a girl, Susie doesn't match up with the description of the second hero at all when we first meet her, but as her character develops throughout the chapters, she grows more and more into that role. She may have started her journey as a bully to Chris, and shortly after a rival to the Fun Gang, but after befriending Lancer, she begins to change her ways. At the start of Chapter 2, Susie already feels like a changed character, excited to hang out with Chris and go on another adventure. A far cry from the girl who pushed Chris against a locker and threatened them the day before. While Susie can't equip ribbons in the first 4 chapters, she might be able to later on. Maybe the situation becomes dire enough for her to acquiesce, or she further understands that her softer side isn't a weakness. There could also be a ribbon in future chapters that she just happens to like. No pressure or character growth required for her to put it on. This logic also applies to equipping swords, though her main complaints are that Chris's weapons are either too small or too weak for her, rather than being girly. And we can also see this logic being applied in Susie's healing ability. She starts out in Chapter 1 only having damage-based magic, but she starts to learn how to heal from Relsei halfway through Chapter 2, and by the time Susie battles Gerson in Chapter 4, her healing magic improved from only healing single-digit HP to over 30 in a single cast. Now that we see how Susie could actually be the second hero, let's get back to the possibility that both characters are intended to fit that role. It's possible that the prophecy originally intended for Noelle to be the second hero, but that the love that finds its way to her wasn't actually meant to be from Susie, but from Chris. Well, not actually Chris, but the human heart caged within them. What if that love finds its way to her through the weird route? In the Chapter 3 Mantle game, we can see a white-cloaked figure with ice powers, who acts as our ally, or item, before becoming used up. In the Chapter 2 Weird route, Noelle stays with Chris for much longer than in the standard route, and allows us to skip major portions of our time with Susie, becoming more of the second hero in a literal sense. Also, in the Chapter 4 Weird route, Noelle chooses to go to the festival with Chris, rather than Susie. At the start of Chapter 1, Noelle volunteers to go get chalk with Susie, though Elphys sends Chris instead. Even if Noelle intended on going with Susie, it's possible that the prophecy predicted her wanting to go with Chris, since they were childhood friends. Instead, we get the canon story of Susie and Chris finding the Castletown Dark World. While we still don't know what the prophecy predicted that Susie and Relsei reacted so poorly to, it's possible that only happens if Noelle takes the mantle of the second hero. And, using the mantle game as inspiration, it could be that the second hero sacrifices herself, which would match up with the text from the game when the white-cloaked figure disappears and reads, "She was used up." From the phone call with Carol we get at the end of the Chapter 4 Weird route, it seems like following the prophecy is the goal of the Light World antagonists. What if this possible sacrifice could either be the second hero herself, or Des? In the Weird route, Noelle, as the second hero, might decide to sacrifice herself to save Des from her Dark World form, inadvertently causing the roaring. In the normal route, Susie might convince Chris to sacrifice Des instead, preventing the original roaring, but causing Des, as the knight, to cause a similar roaring-like Dark World spawning event to occur. This way, the second hero could be either Susie or Noelle. The second hero always makes a difficult sacrifice, either herself or Des, and the roaring always happens. Or maybe Papyrus is the knight, and the true second hero is Caddy. What do I know? Well, there is something I don't know, which is what's going to happen in Chapter 5, which we're all going to get to play tomorrow. And whether or not my second hero theory, or my pre-Chapter 3 Death Knight theory ends up being true, I'm super excited for the Fun Gang's next adventure. Thanks for watching my amateur Deltarune theory. If you want to check out my Death Knight theory, click over here, and if you want to check out a video by maybe Dennis playing through Deltarune with me commentating, you can click over here. If not, happy Chapter 5 Eve.